Hello and welcome everyone for another episode of the Cultured Nerd Podcast. This week, we're going to talk about a couple of topics that I think people may or may not want to hear, but we'll bring it up anyways. Firstly, what happened with the DCEU? Why did it fail? Because realistically, it really did. So we're going to talk about what happened the past maybe 9-ish years of this shared universe experience that DC tried to give us, and what led to the company falling apart and now needing to be softly rebooted by new management again for like the fifth time. So it makes you wonder what really happened. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, but we're also going to talk about James Gunn. And over the weekend, he went onto Twitter and just started interacting with fans and answering a butt ton of questions. So we're going to talk about what he talked about, what he's hinting at, and what that means for the bigger future. And then lastly, Sony made this startling announcement earlier where they announced that they're pairing up with Legendary Pictures. Legendary, most notably, was the big hand with everything Zack Snyder's Snyderverse, the Godzilla franchise, and everything for Warner Brothers' big budget films, including Dune. And they've officially left Warner Brothers and moved on to Sony. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, but let's get into it, everyone.
I had to mute myself. I started gut laughing when you said, why did it fail? Because it is a huge failure. The numbers prove what a failure it was.
And I feel like I know that there was a lot of people who like to bring up, it didn't fail because the first DC movies made more than the first 6 Marvel movies. And that's almost inconsequential because the key difference was that Paramount, when they were making Phase 1, they did not nearly hype as much as Warner Brothers did for these projects. They did not slam posters, cross promotions. They didn't make commercials for Carl's Jr. with Superman. They didn't do things like that. There was minimal.
It started it all. They didn't even know. I mean, it laid the pathwork for what was to come. The fact that these other movies just had to really copy them and couldn't even do that. I mean, they've always wanted to be their own thing, but they never figured it out. And they didn't figure it out like 9 times, right? Like, how many of these movies are in the negative? Well, let's show them what we're talking about right now. These numbers. Where did these numbers come from, Taylor?
The trades, actually, but someone put this together on Reddit /box office, and brought up the actual profits. And the profits is something different than the box office because the DCEU currently has 12, 13 movies, and the overall box office for these is well over $1 billion, well over. However, nobody ever talks about what is actually happening with the actual profits because they say, box office take for Batman v Superman was what? I mean, it was like 800K, 870, something around that line. And that was fantastic. However, the actual profit was about 100 million. And that's because of the massively inflated production budgets / tie-in budgets. They paid for toys, they paid for merchandise, they paid for posters, they paid for cross promotion. They did so much advertising that they needed to break $1 billion to really make it matter.
And the advertising dollars that go into these movies is so much. There's a great clip of Matt Damon being interviewed on Hot Ones, where he's eating the hot chicken wings.
Yeah.
And they're talking about that to make a movie now. You basically have to make $100 million. You have $100 million budget for a movie. You then need to match that money just in the advertising budget.
Yeah.
So these movies go in so much in debt already that if they don't perform at a very high level, it hurts them. Also, pull that list back up again.
Before we jump into this, one of the first comments that we got was, hey, before we talk about DC, can we quickly talk about the Super Mario Brothers trailer? The second trailer dropped at 2:00 this afternoon on a Nintendo Direct. Michael, have you watched it yet?
I did watch it. Let's talk about it.
I watched it when it happened, and then I put it on for my son because my 16-month-old son likes cartoons. He likes stuff like that. He actually we were at the store and he grabbed a Mario doll. For some reason, he likes the look of Mario, and he loves watching his brother play it. I put the trailer on just to see what he would do. And this kid, let me just see if I can light it up, was literally ear to ear smiling watching the trailer. Like, he just loved it. And he was just like, and that was him, like, just getting back. Like, he enjoyed it. And I honestly loved this trailer.
I think they realized that you can't do Mario without doing all of Mario. And that feels like a lot of Mario. They're also basing it off Mario Galaxy, which is the best of the Mario games. You know what I mean? Like, they're allowing for themselves to do so many different things.
It was so clever watching this trailer, because it was, you had the trailer, and obviously you had the Super Mario Galaxy vibes where they talked about the different universes, different galaxies, and all that stuff, and that was cool. They had the stars from the first trailer where you see that Bowser's goal is to travel from galaxy to galaxy to stars and all that. But you also had this whole, like, I love this to death. We're seeing Princess Peach preparing him for the fight. So she made a training course, and it was literally like level 1-1 for Mario Brothers. And I'm like, I love this so much.
All of that
it's a training course.
For sure. That's not the big adventure. You're preparing to go battle Bowser, so you have to practice on blocks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the cars, they got the Mario Karts in there. They got Super Smash Brothers in there. The fact that Mario is fighting Donkey Kong. That was
even a throwback from the original Donkey Kong game where he's like on the scaffolding and they're fighting. And I'm like, this has got Smash Brothers / original Donkey Kong. I'm like, I am all for this trailer. I'm loving it. Mario was in a freaking squirrel suit and he was flying around.
Yes.
Princess Peach had the fire flower.
Yeah.
I was like, this movie, it's rumored this movie's supposed to be like 85 minutes, 90 minutes long, which I'm going to see it a couple times in theaters if it's actually that short. Like, that sounds fantastic, because
there's no way it's only 90 minutes. 90
but that's
minutes?
That's how average kids' cartoons are. Like, that's normal. Like,
how long is Frozen?
Frozen runtime. An hour and 48 minutes. They're a little longer because Disney's that way. But let's see, Despicable Me.
Yeah, Despicable Me is barely a movie.
Despicable Me runtime. Hour and 35, 90 minutes. Right? And that was Illumination, and this is the same people that are making this movie. So they're able to cram an entire movie in 90 minutes and then maximize their profits. And they're doing it with freaking Mario. And I'm all for it. I thought that everyone who was complaining about Chris Pratt with the first trailer, hearing him do the Mario sounds in this one sold me. Like, he made this like iconic Mario like shout in the racing part of the trailer, and I'm like, here it is. I love it.
As long as, listen, there's a lot of people around that Mario. As long as they do a lot of talking and Chris Pratt does a lot of reacting, I think we're going to be okay. I'll tell you this.
His Mario reactions are perfect.
The adventure that they laid out for us in this trailer looks really fun and looks like the breadth and scope of what I want in a Mario movie. Taylor, I think you're also right. I will now go see this movie. This trailer was like, yes, I would like to go experience this and go watch this with a bunch of people, because I think it'll be that it's going to be fun.
It's going to be such a weird movie-going experience, because this is Illumination. They're going to have a movie that's made for like kids, and then you're going to have everyone 30 and up, all these 90 kids who are like, this is the Mario movie that I wish we got 30 years ago. And like,
do you think they do a tie-in for it? Do you think we get a game out of it?
Why? We have the games. Like, that's the thing. It's like, to me, it was like when the Detective Pikachu movie came out, and I loved that movie. I thought it was utterly fantastic. My son and I went and saw it. My wife was bored, but she's not a huge Pokemon fan. But that movie was very reverent to the source material and even referenced parts of the original source material, which was fantastic. And it wasn't, you couldn't tell if it was a tie-in from the games or from the TV show, because it referenced both simultaneously, which was wonderful. But this movie also feels firmly in that same kind of a vein, where it's like, it's part of that world. It's still something different, but it's not like Halo, where it's, let's just do our own thing and ignore the source material. This Mario movie feels like it's extremely reverent to the source material.
Yeah, isn't it crazy that when they actually do their homework, it feels really great, and it's like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I want to do.
Exactly. And it's so weird.
If they
But
start going to other galaxies, everyone, we're gonna see 8-bit Mario. We're gonna see Game Boy Mario's. We're gonna see we're gonna see crazy incarnations of Mario. They haven't even jumped through paintings yet. Like there's so much
yeah,
stuff we haven't seen that we're gonna get.
seriously, I feel like this movie, if they have one moment where he has to step into a wall to get through a puzzle and he becomes the 8-bit Mario going across the wall like in the new Mario Switch game, like I will just be like, okay.
They get it. They're working on that. They're working on it at Universal Studios. Mario's coming. It's going to be a big Mario summer.
It's going to be a huge Mario summer, and I'm all for it. I love it. But so as we gushed so much over the Mario projects because I loved it, let's get back to the task at hand.
Oh boy!
Why did the DCEU fail?
You made a
because
you made a title for it and everything.
I did make a title for it because I wanted people to know that I want to talk about it. So why did it fail? The box office was very self-evident, and there were some big time, obviously, hurdles with the project. I mean, Man of Steel came out exactly how Zack and Chris Nolan wanted it to, because Chris Nolan was defending Zack the entire time. Every time studio says don't do this, Nolan would come in and stop them. But again, Man of Steel only made a profit about $42 million. It had a decent box office, but it wasn't massive, right? And for Superman, you expect massive because it's Superman. He's the most recognized hero on the planet. And it did a measly $40 million profit, right? That's kind of insane.
To be fair, though, the next go around of Superman in Batman v Superman doubled that movie. So everyone who saw that first movie brought a friend. That's pretty good.
However, you have the last time Batman was on film, it made over $1 billion on his own. So the studio was packing so much to making this work.
Yeah.
That $100 million profit is insane for the biggest crossover on franchise history.
That movie was it was at Taco Bell. It was on gas. It was everywhere. Everybody knew that movie was coming. Yeah.
And then Suicide Squad actually made more money than Batman vs Superman, which is insane to me. Wonder Woman blew it out of the water, but then Justice League utterly failed. And we all know the story of why Justice League failed. But then
also
Aquaman,
what was the budget? I mean, that 60 million doesn't even start adding in all.
It was a negative 60 million. It was at a deficit still.
Oh, I know. Add to that deficit, Taylor. How much did Zack Snyder's recut cost?
They added another 40 million to finish Zack's version.
Great. That's $100 million then. You know what I mean? Just for that one movie alone.
The problem with that, and I will say this for everyone who thinks that Zack Snyder's Justice League was a success, the problem with it was that it was a streaming-only project. By not releasing it in theaters, it never made a true box office profit. Its numbers, unfortunately, went nowhere.
Yeah.
Because all the people who were excited for Zack Snyder's Justice League subscribed on day one. So they didn't see a giant spike in subscribers. They saw the subscribers they had from the beginning, and they thought, oh, so it wasn't a huge hit. So they disregarded it. The reality is we have a combination of multiple things. I mean, obviously, Shazam made $74 million profit, more profit than Superman, which is insane. Birds of Prey was in the negatives, Wonder Woman 84 in the negatives, Suicide Squad was in the negatives.
Now, question.
Batgirl was...
do we lump in Wonder Woman 84 and the Suicide Squad as being part of the weirdness of COVID? Because, like, Wonder Woman, I was not going to leave my house to go see in a theater. And then the Suicide Squad, it felt like it was streaming so quickly. I watched it twice. I really liked it, but I didn't spend any extra money on it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where I think a lot of the issue came from, was that obviously COVID screwed those two movies, and that's sort of what it is. Black Adam is out now, and it's still not making the money it needs to even break even, which sucks. But the reality that we have is that, why did the DCEU fail? I mean, Marvel succeeds on brand loyalty.
Yeah.
Marvel can sneeze and the fans will run in droves and watch the projects, right? And we said this before the show, is that the reason why the DCEU failed was partly mismanagement, right? I mean, the management they wanted to maximize profits. They did what they did because they were trying to maximize profits. And the problem was that Man of Steel was deemed too dark. So when BVS came out and the movie was done, they wanted Zack to cut 30 minutes off of it to make it more economically friendly for the theaters. And to obviously keep it from its R rating, because that would have made it even harder to really market to, especially with like toys and like merchandise, right?
The regular cut of the movie's bad. The director's cut is the director's cut gives you everything that you want, and then they didn't give us that cut, so now it's a bad product going into the movie theaters.
But then the movie got just destroyed. Word of mouth destroyed the movie. But the what I'm getting at is that because of how bad BVS went in theaters, they gutted Suicide Squad. They gutted Justice League. Then they started course correcting because the audiences weren't showing up. And the sad reality is that the management is only part to blame because they were very reactionary on this whole thing. The movie fails, so what do? They try to make the next movie more catering to what they want. And what's happened? The next movie actually made more money. Right?
Which
BVS 50 million more with Suicide Squad after they butchered the crap out of that film. That's a pretty almost instant turnaround.
Yeah, do you think that they got the raw, like their Pavlovian response was they did like 2 bad movies, but they did better. So they're like, we just got to keep doing this. And then we get what happened later on.
Yeah, and then they kept doing it. The thing is, the management of DC kept trying to chase the Marvel formula because that's what was working. And the reason why Marvel works is not because their movies are AAA Oscar-winning movies. Their movies work because they have a brand loyalty that DC does not have.
Well, how does DC build it then? Like, how do we get the same level of fandoms? Because because the numbers say it's not there. You know, I know people like to say, I mean, what it says that Jason Momoa has a following. It means that Zack Snyder has a following, right? These names attached to these projects. I guess Gal Gadot with that first Wonder Woman movie though was really fun, and everyone talked about it. It's a lot like the Captain America movie, which was really good as well. I don't know. How do they make this? How do they get their fans to be ride or die?
So I was talking to a graphic artist who is very well known within the community. He does a fantastic job with his fan arts. He's got hundreds of thousands of followers. He does amazing work. I'm going to leave his name out of it because I know what he says is going to probably piss some people off. But his stance on why DC failed was because of the fans. And he said it flat out. He said, it's a very straight topic. There's no conspiracy theory situation here at all. The fans were never on board. The moment Ben Affleck was announced, they booed. The internet attacked. He's not my Batman. He's not my Batman. The movie came out and he was trashed by the fans, specifically Ben, because he was not their Batman. This Batman killed. This Batman did this. They trashed him because they didn't agree with the direction that was done. An emotional scene where a son is trying to save the life of his mother over his own life was considered cringy. And now the same people take offense about lack of emotions in the current DC movies. The same people who bash Zack for hiring Henry, for hiring Ben, are now creating chaos to get Henry and Ben back. There was no loyalty at the beginning. Now they're trying to force its way back in. They're two-faced, and it's insane that nobody is talking about this. Right? And he kept going.
You're absolutely that line about they tore Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck down, and now we are stammering for them to come back and continue what they were doing.
Right. And he says this. So I asked him to come on the show. He said he can't because of reasons, and then I have to scroll down a little bit. But I have been watching this shit cultivate since 2012, post Man of Steel, and you can easily see the split starting to happen right then. And the split became even stronger when BVS came out. You had fans that were loyal to Zack that stayed loyal and that fought for the Snyder Cut to be released. And then you had everyone else who was mad that these happened. And then Zack had a family tragedy. And what happens? To serve the toxic audience, the studio, to serve a toxic audience that was asking for the MCU-style DC, the studio hired the one person they thought that could give them success, Joss Whedon, the guy who gave Marvel success. And he goes on to saying that now you can put the tinfoil hat on and say because of that, you can easily see how Endgame, Infinity War, all that stuff obviously followed Zack's original plan for Justice League Part 2.
Also, I don't assume that the success of those Marvel movies has anything to do with Joss Whedon at all. I mean,
but if you look at it on paper, Marvel Phase 1, minimal profits until Joss Whedon's Avengers.
But I also feel like that was the buildup, though. That's what we were building. Yeah, that's what we were building up for.
Yeah.
Also, some of those movies in between were stinkers, and people still supported them. Like Thor 2, blah, that movie is not good.
It's not. But as he goes on, he says, nobody called out anybody. The heroes shut down their first attack and win. Second time they lose, someone become. Oh no, this is him basically talking about the comparisons. Let me get back to this, because he went on for a while about how like people don't realize that everything that we praised Infinity War and Endgame for was what we shit on Zack for setting up.
Right.
He says, but look at it right now, post Endgame. What do you have with Marvel? They're shooting for the shooting for Infinity War and Justice League. The shooting for Infinity War started when Justice League's reshoots ended. And he keeps going. He kind of teases back to that. But who we don't really hold accountable for? The folks at Warner Brothers who were trying to be reactionary and fight and give the fans what they were claiming that they wanted on Twitter. Those hypocritical fans who wanted happiness, who wanted bright colors, who bitched about Zack's movies. They were trying to appease these people because they thought these people spoke for everyone. He says, and he basically says the ironic part is that the silver lining here is that James Gunn is now with DC. This guy literally turned B, C, D level characters at Marvel into gold. Kevin Feige even said this guy is better at his job than he is.
Yeah, I just watched that holiday special, which my wife said was delightful. A person who does not care, just enjoyed this media. And yeah, they had that cosmonaut dog. Like, he can have all the B-level space people. They're all super fun in his world.
And, I mean, he says, at a time when Marvel humor was turning into cringe, he came in and changed the tables with unknown characters with Guardians of the Galaxy. And he repeated that same formula with Suicide Squad.
He gave the Marvel Universe a soundtrack. More than the Avengers theme, he gave space 1970s music. And it's great. And it's true of all of these things. And it makes it feel nostalgic, but it's also wonderful.
And he goes on. He says he repeated the same thing with Suicide Squad. And then with Peacemaker. He made Peacemaker and showed that comic book TV can be way better than what we've been getting.
And Peacemaker took 80s hair metal and made it fun and put it in a context and was like, this is how you rock out to it.
Yeah. And mind you, I mean, there's going to be people who complain about it. They can bitch, and that's fine. And I get the criticisms. I do think that James Gunn went a little too hard in some of the dick jokes, but that's also per the character, right? But he even says, you can rewatch it over and over again and never really get bored because that is the magic of the projects that he makes. James Gunn will not only save the DCU, he will create a behemoth monster called the DCU, and people will still hate him for it. Like going to a party and getting your picture taken along with.
So sad. You think so?
No, hear what he says. Going to a party and getting your pictures clicked along with posting jokes doesn't make you a pedophile. It just makes you have really dark sense of humor that you really shouldn't be having on social media. But people are willing to crucify him for it. And he said, like here, you know better than anyone on this planet that right now the reality is that Zack is not coming back. Not for at least 5 years because he is locked in with Netflix and he is not leaving someone who's going to make him happy. But Here we have it again. Cancel culture is trying to cancel the guy who's coming in to fix the situation and give us the DC that we want.
Oof. Okay.
And
Well,
he basically was like, the fans are the problem, because you have this studio that was being extraordinarily reactionary, which is what studios do. They pump all this money into a project, and then when the project doesn't work out, they look at what the feedback was. And the feedback said, it was too dark, I didn't understand it, etc. Zack made cult classic films. But the reason cult classic films are cult classics is because they take a while for people to understand what they mean. Blade Runner was a cinematic failure.
yeah.
And yet,
Right.
we now talk about how amazing it is for history. That's how Zack's movies were. They weren't made for the mainstream, and the mainstream caused these movies to die.
That's so true. They're not, you're right. They're very auteur movies with superheroes as their centerpieces, but they're not. And also, unfortunately, he also needs a very long brush. He doesn't paint tiny pictures. He needs a much bigger brush. Fans, the great boogeyman for Warner Brothers. I mean, I guess so. So, okay.
But it's like
listen.
This comment right here. Brand loyalty. So many of the MCU films aren't good. So much mediocrity, but because there are more winners, they have success. Okay. And that's the reality.
They fired everybody from Warner Brothers, okay? But they can't fire the fans. Are there new fans to be had out there? Do you think if they bring, Henry Cavill's back, so it's going to be all the same old faces, how do we convince people that these movies aren't the old DC?
It's going to be hard, because you have scoopers out there. You have internet personalities out there who are basically now already starting to say James Gunn is going to ruin everything. Instead of admitting that they were wrong on gaslighting fans, they're saying that James Gunn is canceling everything and we're never going to get what we want.
Do you think Guardians 3 is going to be the nail that makes everybody shut up? Because Guardians 3 is going to be a big movie. It's going to be the final of this cast. It's going to do really well. Do you think that will make these people go, okay, maybe he'll do something good over here?
Probably not. Because the reality is we have a chunk of fans, and I always hated this term, but I see it more and more every day, and they refer to these fans as the Snyder cult, where I personally love Zack Snyder. I love what he's made. I love talking to him about this because he was such a fun person to talk to. He's the most genuine person I've ever had the pleasure of speaking with.
Taylor, this is exactly what somebody inside the Zack Snyder cult would say. This is what you would say.
When Zack says he's happy at another studio and wants you to support the people that he is supporting, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, and I feel like that is the difference, because I feel like a bunch of people are tied in. I don't know. I feel like the real. I want the real Slim Shady and the real Zack Snyder fans to stand up. I would like to know the people that are actually going to be there, because, right, you've absolutely said it. He wants you to go support these new projects. I guess we have to see if those projects do sit well.
Yeah, and the thing is, so right now we have the remaining handful of projects that are coming out from the old regime that the new regime has been retooling to make it better, right? And you can see it. I mean, I saw Black Adam. I liked it, but you can also see that it was an editing nightmare, that they did change a lot of things because for whatever reason, the previous management did some weird decisions. And I firmly believe that there was at least 30 to 45 minutes of that movie that was cut out that probably would make a dramatically better movie.
What do you think was in the 35 minutes? What do you think that they...
Well, we already know that there was a whole story arc with the JSA that was cut out.
Where so he goes he does a mission with them?
No, there was like a whole, like the JSA backstory stuff. Like when they introduced in the film, they just show up. And you're like, oh, okay.
And then I would assume that the main character of the movie then shows his main character powers and beats all of these people, correct? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Exactly sounds like what The Rock does in his wrestling matches, which is why they have to build up to the next heavy.
But I felt like what was really missing from this movie, I mean, the action was fun. The third act was kind of weird. and there were some valid criticisms that a lot of people were having, was that there were plot holes created by weird editing.
Okay.
They could have explained certain things better. Like, first off, because Kazdan, or whatever the name of that country is, how is it in a world where Batman, Superman, the JSA, Wonder Woman all exist, that you have this war-torn Iran, essentially? Wouldn't they have stepped in at some point?
Oh, no. Don't you know they're all political assholes that don't save people in the world?
They could have easily had a line in there explaining you can't cross into this airspace because of human hostages or something, or things like that. Like, you could have said that they attack heroes. They execute people when heroes show up. Like, they could have had any sort of thing explain these plot holes that they created by not explaining themselves.
Other than the JSA basically allowing war crimes to happen under their watchful eye and not doing anything about it.
Yeah, okay. But then when Black Adam shows up, we got to intervene. Yeah. So, plot holes.
Do they not understand that this is what the fans think? Like, that's why, isn't that part of the appeal of these superhero worlds? Like, yeah, there's an order to the world. Like, there is somebody that takes care of things. And then things happen that threaten that unity, because then it's like our world. Anytime it's too much like our world, it's like, yeah, I know why our world's all messed up, because we're humans without superpowers. We're just regular people.
Yeah. But that's the thing, is like, so there were little plot holes there, and then a lot of people were bitching about, why does Black Adam all of a sudden know English? But the reality is that they talked about this in the Shazam movie. The wisdom of Solomon is the S in the powers that he gets. He literally can speak every language because of magic.
I think they need to lean more into magic. I feel like they like have all this magic stuff, but they don't talk about the world of magic. There is so much magic in the DC movies. That first Suicide Squad movie, the whole lady is magic, right? The Enchantress woman, it's all magic, and like dark magic, like really dark stuff.
And I like this comment here, because this is the point that he keeps saying to people. And it's like he's repeating what I said 2 shows ago. I believe in James Gunn because he can be funny like in Guardians of the Galaxy and dark like in Brightburn. And I firmly believe that is the line you have to have. And
you're going to take all these heroes, and each one of them needs to be a different flavor, right?
It does. It really does.
You can't have a Superman and Aquaman movie feel the same. They all need to have different points of view on the world. And I think that we can have these things. Now, the fact that James Gunn knows how to write humor just means that the adventure of these movies and like dialogue and stuff like that will just be watchable. Because, for example, Taylor and I were talking off air about the weird and kind of butchered Fox Marvel movies, which are the redheaded stepchild of superhero movies.
But I will still argue to this day that I like the Fox X-Men movies over a majority of the MCU movies.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is, when you say that, I go, that's not true. And then I think back in my head and go, oh, you're right, because I don't like
X-Men 2, First Class, Days of Future Past. Like, those movies are like way above on my list than 99% of the MCU. Hell, 90% of the DCEU.
And even the Wolverine movies also have really fun stuff in them as well.
Like X-Men Origins, you could have just made a whole movie of the first 10 minutes and I would have been great.
See, the movie, when we saw it as kids, the movie was bad, but it wasn't
Michael, we were like 22 when that one came out.
Yeah,
we were kids.
We were children. We were babies. We were babies in the womb. When we were babies in the womb eating popcorn, we were eating the popcorn. I remember being
when
like,
you saw it, and I'm like, that wasn't as bad as I was like in denial. I was like,
it was bad, but it wasn't like it held up to movies of its time. It didn't feel like it was like, oh, that was a waste of time. It just sucks that they like had a bad Deadpool and had it, you know what I mean? Just like they just didn't do good stuff with everybody.
I would say too many cooks in the kitchen. There were too many ideas shoehorned into one film. They muddled their own continuity by shoehorning a lot of this stuff in.
Has Ryan Reynolds always had a character with a katana blade? Because I'm pretty sure
in most of his comic book movies, if not all of them, like in Blade and Deadpool.
In Wolverine, didn't he have blades coming out of his hand?
Yeah, I mean, so he had the katanas in the flashback, and then they put the katanas in his arms.
Yeah, he had weird. I think he only has swords in movies.
And even when I was watching that movie, my biggest critique. Are you ready for my biggest critique?
He uses a sword as well.
Yeah, but my biggest critique of that design for Deadpool was look at the length of your forearm.
Yeah.
How does that sword that came out like 4 feet come out of this space? The reason Wolverine's claws are the length that they are is because they fit in his forearm.
Yeah. No, it folds up. It's like it's Japanese technology. It's very advanced. It folds up inside.
Anyways, but then you had the Wolverine, which was set in Japan, and I will say it's one of my guilty pleasure movies. I love that movie unequivocally. And the director's cut, the rated R version, where he attacks the ninjas with a snowplow and like starts grinding people up, it was insane.
I've never even seen that version. I've never even seen it.
Go on to like Amazon, pay $10 for it. It's
you know what's funny is
fun.
Regardless of those two movies, which people have criticisms over, Logan is right. Logan is the next level movie. Logan was the setup for what I thought was going to happen. The end of that movie was like, great. Let's go follow X-23. Let's go keep with this storyline. And we never got more of that story.
We never got it because Disney came in and sank the ship. They demanded reshoots and cut content out of Dark Phoenix, which is
almost a good movie. It's really fun.
But the 30 minutes that was cut from that movie explained that the bad guys were Skrulls. It showed them as Skrulls. It explained what their motivation was. There was an entire plot that was ripped out of that movie. But the train fight is still
great. It's super fun.
The best you've ever seen these X-Men. Like I will say to this day, if you don't like that movie, fast forward all of it until the train fight, and you will be like, "Damn!"
The fight scene with Magneto in the lobby, where like the building crumbles, like there's great imagery. There's great comic book imagery. Those movies have X-Men looking vignettes in them, which is not true of these other projects.
Right, and then you also had like you brought it up before, New Mutants. A movie that was also critically panned because of the studio coming in and changing things and reshoots and cut content. And the movie is almost a good movie. Didn't see
that in theaters, watched it streaming. And as I was watching it, I was like, I get this is a fun thing. And this is a great group of powers that I wish we could have done anything else. But the budget for that movie has got to be tiny. They never left that building.
Yeah, and they cut out Mr. Sinister at the request of the studio. Why?
Right. And it's not like it's not even like DC. It's not even like Disney is going to be using him anytime soon.
But the reality is, we now know that Disney cannot use any of the characters with pre-existing contracts until those contracts expire. So they literally were cutting out characters and cutting out concepts to free up those licensing in case they wanted them.
Right.
Which is just, it's crazy to me because that's why we're not seeing the X-Men in the MCU until post Secret Wars. And the X-Men that we are seeing are variants of the Fox X-Men because those characters are still tied in with those contracts with those people, which is insane to me.
So we can't see Cyclops. We can't see.
Oh, we can see Cyclops. But we can see Cyclops as the kid who played him in the last movie or James Marsden. One of the two.
But not a new Cyclops.
Not for like another 5 years.
The kid is okay. James Marsden's my favorite, but he's getting old. He's getting long in the tooth.
I want both. Can we just get the Secret Wars, have them both fighting next to each other and doing Cyclopsy shit at the same time?
An optic blast. Just doing them right next to each other.
Yeah, big X optic blast. Everything you're saying, yeah. But that's also how we get Deadpool 3 with Hugh Jackman, is because they can't use anyone else's Wolverine. But Hugh Jackman is like, I'll come back.
I know that there won't be people that enjoy that performance or won't like the choices that Ryan Reynolds makes, but Ryan Reynolds does as much as he can with as much as they will give me, with as much as they will give him. He would do more, but I always feel like he is constrained. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why can't we get any X-Men in these movies, right? We have to see a seat where they close a door. It's like, no, bro, there's no money for you to have anybody else.
Yeah. But again, that is why we have brand loyalty with Marvel in all of its capacities, and they will have more brand loyalty because of the Fox movies, because they're going to bring those characters back. When Professor X shows up in Doctor Strange 2, and they even use the 90s theme, You had 90s kids excited. You had Fox X-Men fans excited.
It's crazy that that movie was Doctor Strange too. Doctor Strange was in 5 other movies as the main character, even before we got back to him. He is in every one of those movies. He's in all the Sony Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, but now what do we have? James Gunn is still being publicly crucified by DC fans on Twitter.
Well, let's see what these DC fans are saying, because he's answering questions left and right.
What I love so much is that he hasn't even taken the job on full time, and yet he is acting more transparent than anyone has ever in the history of any of these companies. Where he's engaging.
Kevin Feige doesn't answer questions on Twitter.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. And so James Gunn, this fella right here.
Look at that hair.
He turned into a silver fox over the course of the pandemic, which is far better than most of us. We all gained 10, 15 pounds. And he became an adult.
I started using a weighted hula hoop. I'm trying to lose my 15 pounds.
Anyways, so over the weekend, he started tweeting, and then people were just bombarding him with questions. And then he started answering those questions. He didn't give away a slate because we all want the slate, but we're probably going to get it after the new year.
Yeah.
But he did talk about what he's going to actually be kind of doing.
What did he say?
So one person, I really hope you'd utilize Booster Gold. And he says, interestingly, Booster was the most requested character when I asked on Mastodon what character they'd most like to see on screen. I'm not creating stories by public vote, but I found it fascinating nevertheless.
Who's Booster Gold?
Booster Gold is a fun character. I'll drop this real fast. Booster Gold is that dude in the gold outfit with the blue, and he has that little floating dude that hangs around him. He's the guy from the future who thought he could come to the present and become rich off of being a superhero by using his future technology. And he ends up developing a heart of gold and becomes a member of the Justice League. He's a fun character.
That's great.
Yeah, I would love to see him too. This one, just one question, James. Are we going to hear more about this plan before San Diego Comic-Con 23? He said, I'd find it surprising if you didn't hear anything at least a little bit more before then. So even he's saying that they're probably going to say before Comic-Con.
Well, he's got to show this to a bunch of investors. I mean, you know what I mean? Other people are going to sign off on this. And once those people say it's a go, then we can start getting drips and drabs.
So next set of questions. Are you and your partner planning to give us more DC character TV shows that will add up to the story of the DCU? Yes, most definitely. The DCU will be connected across film and TV and animation.
Which is the thing I have wanted forever. Those DC animated movies are so good. And the fact that they have no continuity and they're one-offs and they're oh, here's a fun adventure you never get to see again. I love it. And James Gunn is going to tie video games into all of this as well.
And that's what I'm getting to. Sorry, I just dropped it right there. Will DC Studios have any hand in the comic side of DC publishing? Very open communication. As everyone knows, I'm a huge comic fan, and I hope everything we do will lead to more people reading DC Comics and vice versa. But Peter and I are not in charge of the comics, just all filmed DC Entertainment. So all filmed DC Entertainment is what he's in charge of. He is letting Jim Lee take care of the comics, but they are going to be very openly, constantly communicating.
If James Gunn writes a new, interesting angle on these characters, they will absolutely give it a comic book adaptation. If he can find a fun way to do this, absolutely we could have DC movies in comic books.
Yeah. There was 3 more things that he answered that I thought were pretty important. You already said it. Are there plans to be connected to for games to be connected to the DCU as well? Yes. Flat out, just yes.
It's great. Super fun.
Sir, just one question. Will we get any projects written and directed by you in the future? Or will you just be looking over all of them since you have a lot more stuff to do now than ever? I will continue writing and directing select DC projects. So he's still going to get his hands dirty, but he's still going to help oversee
Which
that.
also means he has his pick of the litter. He can do any movie he wants to, and he'll probably finish up the things he has started. He has commitments to those actors and those stories. But once those are gone, it'll be interesting to see what he picks up next.
All right. And this is the one that I want to say for last for the specific reason that what it implies. will there still be standalone animation or live action shows that will take place in separate worlds, like the Harley Quinn show? Yes, some. So everyone who says that he's going to cancel everything and make it one cohesive MCU, it's wrong. Because he says that the multiverse will still live on.
Yeah, they're making that Joker 2. That Joker 2, if that Joker 2 does the same money as the first movie, we're getting a Joker 3. You know what I mean? Like, at this point, I mean, that's another movie. I mean, will the fans support that movie? Because they didn't want to support the first movie. I feel like the word of mouth sold that movie, because that movie, like, just got bigger each week.
It did. It was a weird snowball. And like Frank said in the comments here, Elseworlds, yes. The studio is going to allow Elseworlds to still exist. And more than likely, they're going to brand it as such. They're probably going to finally say, Joker, Elseworlds, the Batman sequel, Elseworlds. They're probably going to finally use the brand and tell people, not main continuity. And for those who haven't been paying attention, the main continuity is always with the weird DC intro, like the big spanning one. And then the non-continuity projects are not. Like that's kind of like how it's currently been, but they're going to eventually.
Elseworld titles have performed pretty good.
The Elseworld titles have performed better than the main continuity titles.
Time after time they have.
Which is a bummer. But what we do know is that the studio is giving James room to breathe. And he's not reinventing the wheel, but he's greasing it up and he's trying to fix it as best as he can. Peacemaker, the Suicide Squad, those projects were not reboots. They were the softest reboot you could get inside of a main continuity. But he also breathed new life into these things.
Well, one of the things we talked about beforehand is Hollywood locking down its talent. And James Gunn and this new regiment has locked down Henry Cavill and things like that. And Netflix has locked down Zack Snyder, who has said he is very happy there. Yeah. Let's talk about the next piece of information about Sony and Legendary.
Well, before we get into that, there was another rumor that came about over the last couple days, actually. Netflix signed, I think it was filed for a patent or some kind that is basically saying Rebel Moon will not only get the movie projects, they've also will be getting merchandise. So this will be like almost Stranger Things level merchandise that you see everywhere. Rebel Moon will get merchandise.
They're pushing it
They're pushing it hard. They believe in this project so much that they're going in a way that they haven't done since Stranger Things. And the project hasn't even come out yet.
Wow.
Right? And then there was another rumor that hit the internet that Zach had apparently plotted out 6 Rebel Moon projects. Which is, if it's true, I'm honestly, I only heard that there was 2 or 3 happening, but if it's 6, then holy crap.
But you understand that it's Zack Snyder. So we're not talking about 12 hours of content. We're talking about like 18, like, you know what I mean? Like all of these projects are going to be, if he has 6 movies, we're not talking 2-hour movies, Taylor. We're talking 3.5, 4-hour movies.
Well, and that's what I think is going to be the most interesting part about it is that what we have coming out right now is Rebel Moon Part 1. It doesn't mean that's part 1 of 6. It means that's part 1 and 2 of 1, and then parts 1 and 2 of 2. He's probably going to give us like 12 movies.
I don't understand Netflix. How does Netflix track? Like, listen, merchandise sales will absolutely mean it, but that movie has to really resonate with people then. And if they think it is, I'm excited to see what they're going to do with it. Yeah. Because that's a big push. Because you're right. Stranger Things sells merchandise. And again after again, Stranger Things knocks it out of the park every season. Every season. And the fact that this season resonated the way that it did in so many different mediums speaks to the success of it. And that's the kind of stuff that they have to do, which is funny. James Gunn kind of did that with the 70s soundtracks. That Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack was a big listen. People streamed that mix of songs.
Honestly, the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 soundtrack, the awesome mixer, I actually have that in my CD player. That's my CD alarm. Like, I'll wake up to that first song.
Yeah, Come and Get Your Love.
Yeah. That's always been like it's been like 40 for years. I love that soundtrack. It's an amazing soundtrack. The second soundtrack was just as good, but not revolutionary like the first one. But now with the holiday soundtrack,
the holiday soundtrack was spectacular.
I was straight up blasting
the first song, the Earth Christmas is
from
Weird.
the 97s.
It's super fun. I couldn't believe
I don't know what Christmas is. That's such a weird song, but I loved it so much.
Have you listened to like any of the like Punk Goes Christmas?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course I have.
Of course
we grew up together.
I know. Okay, I know. I was like, oh, I wonder what songs they're going to use. His Christmas upbeat soundtrack of that movie is also a real fun, and he wrote new songs for it. So again, it shows the effort and time that they're going to put into this stuff. I'm super excited to see when he's the big boss, what he can accomplish.
Yeah. And mind you, I mean, he said this on Twitter, like someone, they said that he made this project in 3 hours, and he said that he put the pitch together with the outline in 3 hours. Then he wrote the thing over the weekend. But the fact that he was able to come up with a solid plan, start to finish, Guardians are going to be kidnapping Kevin Bacon because of a story that happened with Peter and Yondu as a child, and then Peter's going to have this revelation, like of that stuff.
Which he used bad Star Wars animation, which is a throwback.
No. What he did was he filmed it in live action and used rotoscoping like the old Star Wars show did.
Wow, that's great. That's super fun.
Yeah, you can see on the social media, he actually has a picture of Michael Rook or Yondu in like the mocap stuff because he filmed them physically holding the stuff, and then they rotoscoped the whole thing, which is just more effort than he should have put into it, and it came off so well.
Yeah.
But I'm not mad that James Gunn is in charge. I am not cautiously optimistic anymore. I am getting more and more excited because despite all of the controversies, despite all of the people saying that he's this or that, or trying to light up the torches and get the pitchfork sharpened, he has succeeded on almost every level, despite everything going against him.
And succeeded with Peacemaker. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what a character to invest time in. And he will now be the building block to a bunch of other stuff. But like, look what he did with that. Now let's see what he can do with the main roster, because I think he's going to do really good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to allow the main roster to have humor, but also take themselves very seriously when they need to. And that's what I'm really hoping for. I hope that this will work. And next year, 2023, we got 4 DC movies coming out, 1 every quarter. And these are the last movies of the last regime. So everything 2024 onward is Gunn. So whatever they announce in the next 90 days, we're going to have a very, very interesting world.
How do we get people to go see those movies? I mean, that's the real question, right? I mean, those are the movies that got to perform.
I like this comment really fast. I always believed the idea that all good soundtracks from James Gunn movies, also from Snyder. Yeah. The best movie soundtracks that I've had that I purposely would go out and buy are from either James Gunn or Zack Snyder. Right. I love the Watchmen soundtrack. It is filled with just pure 80s wonderfulness.
Yeah.
And there was something about what James and Zach did on their movies where they were allowed to have free reign on their soundtracks. Like, I still quietly suspect that the reason the soundtrack was the way it was for Zack Snyder's Justice League wasn't because Zack got to pick the music he wanted, was because they wouldn't give him any more money for licensing. So he worked with what he had.
Yeah,
but
you think there's an extended playlist of songs that was supposed to be in that movie?
One of the things I would love to ask him is, if you had carte blanche with a soundtrack, what would you have done differently with the movie? Because we know that he commissioned that version of Come Together.
That's such a great song. That's such a great question to ask him. What a great because I bet there is some other stuff or a song he would love to have made.
Yeah, and I like this. It's not like he wants to suck at his job and get fired only a year into it. No, James Gunn he's going to take this job probably more seriously than any other project he ever has.
And people in town know he can do the job. Disney is kind of quiet. Listen, Disney is kind of I think they feel like they messed up by not getting him. And I think because Disney basically fired the last guy, right? The old guy came in like on Monday, he fired him immediately.
Oh yeah. So one thing that gave me the most confidence I could have ever had for him taking this job was that an article came out just earlier today where they asked James Gunn what his inspiration for DC was. And surprisingly, it's not Marvel. He's not looking at the MCU as inspiration. What he is looking at is 90s Star Wars. And for those of you who didn't live in the 90s Star Wars, the 90s Star Wars was probably some of the best time for Star Wars fans.
Shadow of the Empire.
The Star Wars got re-released, and then you had the ramp up to the prequels. And during that time, you had the Legends canon that came out, and where they allowed people to tell their stories within the world, and that world got bigger. And the Shadows of the Empire is one of the greatest examples of how it was done. They created a shared universe over multiple mediums that was done unlike it any time before and has never been done since.
The book Shadows is a banger. Empire, the book is a banger. The video game on the N64, the comic.
You had a comic, you had a game, you had a book, and all of these told different parts of the same story.
And toys.
Yeah, and the toys were different too. I mean, I think that the toys were always like the last one because the toys did some things that none of the other three did. But I remember going out of my way and buying some of those figures. And a buddy of mine, he had the Dash Rendar ship. He had all those things. And like, I remember Shadows of the Empire very fondly. And you have James Gunn taking inspiration from Star Wars' storytelling, where, and the way I interpret it is that the tent poles, the big projects will be the film, the big stories, but then the build-up, the bridging fibers in between, those will be on games, those will be on movies, those will be on that. Like, that to me is the way you do a shared universe.
I wonder what game they're gonna do. I wonder.
I don't even.
I know. It's such a like. Oh, do we get a? I mean, it won't be Batman, but it's got to be as good as those Arkham games. I mean, the
thing is, it's such a weird endeavor. Yeah, the games are going to somehow be connected. Does that mean we're going to get mobile games? Because AAA games can take anywhere between 5 and 10 years. So, what are you going to commission, and where is it going to fit into your plot?
Right, and can you start it January 1st of next year?
Yeah. But the fact that is what his blueprint is that he's not going for the MCU style where MCU phase 1 was just films, MCU phase 2 was just films, phase 3, etc. Now you have the shows and the films kind of doing their thing and they're all connected in their one way, but he's taking it a step further than what Marvel was doing. He's going to have games, he's going to have movies, he's going to have animation, he's going to have this.
That's what the other people are doing in town. Let's circle back to the other thing.
To me, that reminds me, like, what was probably one of my favorite aspects of the latest Marvel phase was when Marvel's projects don't rely on the other continuity, the other stories to hold on its own. Like, my example is Moon Knight.
Yeah.
I loved Moon Knight. And I love that Moonlight did not shoehorn any other Marvel references in there. The fact that it is Marvel still kind of is like, was there references? Like, I don't remember any. There wasn't some like random cameo that tied it all back together. Like Shang-Chi had the ending cameo with like the Hulk and Captain Marvel, and you're like, oh, that's right, it's a Marvel movie. But Moon Knight didn't have any of that. And that's what I'm thinking is what we're probably going to get a big vibe from this, is that you'll get projects that are completely standalone. Oh, you get a Ted Kord Blue Beetle one, you get a Booster Gold one, and the only other references to the greater DC will be like in the background on a TV, Superman flies by or something like that. Like, it'll be set in that world, but the Easter eggs will be so minuscule that it's going to just feel it's like its own thing.
Yeah.
Just like he did with his Guardians films.
Right.
Guardians 2 took place right after Guardians 1. So instead of following the main canon where all these movies were coming out the order that they were, he was like, oh yeah, so 6 movies later, let's just grab Guardians 2 and throw it back in the beginning. He's going to tell the story he wants to tell regardless of how it fits into the timeline. And he's going to let other people tell stories within that world, even if it doesn't need to be shoehorned into the timeline. And that is exciting to me.
Absolutely. This is somebody with vision that is willing to communicate openly with fans and give feedback. That is something no one else is doing. And I think that I think he's going to bring a breath of fresh air.
And mind you, what he did with Peacemaker, I thought was very unique because you had essentially the main character make all these vulgar jokes, these ridiculous comments, and all of these things, but they were all based on like internet gossip. So everything Peacemaker was saying is, oh, this is the truth because I read it online. Like he's literally all of these dick jokes, these dirty jokes, these references, the fish jokes, all that stuff was all based on the fact that this guy didn't know any of these characters, didn't believe anything except for what he read in a chat forum.
Yeah, he is the incel. He is 4chan come to life.
And I thought it was so funny because that was a level of realism that you don't get in comics. Because it was just like, how would these like Zach always asked that question, how would the world react if Superman was real? They would persecute him. That's true. But then you would also have this weird faction of people on 4chan who would think that he has fetishes.
Yeah.
And that's what Peacemaker brought out was that, oh, there's some weird stuff out there.
And they get to bring up all the fun stuff.
I thought that was hilarious, especially even at the end where Flash was like kind of like arguing with Aquaman about the internet rumors. And he's like, that's not true. And he's like, but it is, right? Like, because it made them more human. It was a stupid joke, but it also made them much more viable and believable. So I thought that was funny.
A little humanity in those God characters, I think, would do that franchise a world
because that's
good.
Something that you don't get a lot of.
Yeah.
So and lastly, since we are running a little over the clock, but I'm going to bring it up anyways because we talked about it. Legendary Entertainment formalized their deal with Sony.
Taylor, I as we've been doing this, I've been writing down the movie projects that are going to open the door because this is the framework for getting a God of War movie.
Oh my God, you have no idea. The moment
this is the framework to get a Metal Gear Solid movie. And Legendary is going to be behind it.
You know, they've been trying to make these movies happen for how long? And now Legendary's coming in?
Taylor, this is how we get an Ape Escape movie.
I feel like not enough people know how much I loved Ape Escape. Like, you knew this.
Loves Ape Escape. It's his
in middle school
pleasure.
With PlayStation. You had Mega Man X4 and Iron Man XO Man War, and you played. Those are the games that we played at your house. You came over to my house. We had Final Fantasy VII and Ape Escape, and you were like, "What are these movies?" I'm like, "We're gonna play the crap out of Ape Escape."
It felt like a rite of manhood getting into and beating those games because, like, I got them as a child and didn't understand what I was doing. When I was done with Mega Man X4, I would just speed run that game in the morning and then go to sleep. Yeah, I love those games.
Ape Escape was such a weird game, but anyways, I mean, yeah, we know that Fallout is getting its Amazon show, and I think God of War also has some production that's coming out with Netflix or Amazon. But you can see full on that PlayStation Pictures is going to get massively bolstered by the addition of Legendary Entertainment. But what does that also mean, right? I mean, what was Legendary doing with Warner Brothers before they cut ties? They bankrolled most of the DCEU.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's
because all of Zach's movies were Legendary.
Yeah.
And then the Godzilla stuff. And now we know that the Godzilla stuff is likely shipping back over to Sony because the Monarch TV show that's taking place following the Godzilla versus Kong stuff went to Apple. WB passed on it and Legendary pitched it over to Apple. So we're going to get...
Apple will suck up every project that other studios say no to.
Yeah, it's going to be super weird.
And that's not to say they're bad. Did you see that Will Ferrell Christmas musical? It's great.
We will have a Christmas episode soon. I'll say that.
You did watch it. Okay.
But the only thing that we know of is that what's going to happen with Dune.
Oh, no.
Because Dune Parts 1 and 2 were Warner Brothers with co-oping with Legendary, and they're going to finish that. But are we going to get Children of Dune? Are we going to get all those other projects? Are they just going to die?
Yeah. Taylor, they're dead. I don't know.
Or they're just going to go to, or Sony's going to buy the rights from Warner Brothers to do it. Just continue it on. It's going to be like the weirdness that we got with the Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah, he jumped ship. If they'll buy everything, if they'll let him keep doing that vision and that scope, they'll do it.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah,
gonna be interesting.
The poor Narnia movies. Do you think anyone, I mean, you have to reboot that universe. You can't do anything with those movies.
They're going to reboot it. Last I heard was I think Netflix or Amazon were looking at rebooting it, or was it Disney that was going to reboot it? One of the big three was going to reboot it, and they were talking about hiring someone specifically for it, and there was going to be like they were just going to maybe do it as like a mini series style, kind of like what they're doing with the Lightning Thief one.
Well, I was about to say I'm excited. And a week from now, we get to talk about Willow. The new Willow show is coming, and I love Willow.
I am going to probably admit something that you've known me most of my life. I've never finished Willow.
What are you talking about?
I was thinking about it the other day. I'm like, I know I watched it at your house, but did I ever watch the whole thing? I've never actually sat. It's like the cardinal sin of being a nerd is the one thing. Like everyone has one nerd sin. Mine is I've never sat down and watched all of Willow.
Do we do a watch along? Do I watch it with you? It's on Disney Plus. It's streaming.
I know
now.
it is. It's like in my face every day. It's like Willow series is coming out next week. Are you going to watch the first one? And I'm like, I'll watch it.
It's you know what though? I totally get you. My mom showed me fucked up movies when I was a kid. Like Poltergeist was just a fun movie that you were allowed to watch.
I remember when your mom made me watch that, and we were in middle school, and I'm like, why are we watching this? And you're like, oh, I've been watching it since I was 5. And I'm like, no wonder you are the way that you are.
It's terrifying. Fantasy stuff was fine for some reason. Willow is just a little too scary for your baby. There's just like demon dogs. There's just like a little too scary for a baby.
I will sit down and watch it before next week, and then we'll talk about it because I remember Willow having a there's so many things I remember about Willow, and there was this one time that Lucasfilm pulled a prank on the fans for April Fool's Day and canonized Willow into Star Wars.
That this was on this was some planet that they were using the Force.
Yeah, no, and they said like the magic that they were using in that planet was a deviation from the Force, and they had this big old article, and everyone was like, "This can't be real. It's April Fool's Day," and it was like officially signed by the studio, and I'm like, "This is the best thing I have ever seen a studio do."
I love. I have very fond memories of it. I like Val Kilmer in that movie. I like that. It's a fun fantasy. It was the only like fantasy movie for a lot. For me, it was my favorite fantasy movie until we got Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean? Like that was the sword and shield.
You know me. Ever since we saw Lord of the Rings in theaters, I was ride or die Lord of the Rings. But it was when we were kids. I remember I watched Legend, and that was my fantasy movie as a kid. And you watched Willow, and yeah. So I'll sit down and watch it. I'll watch it, but you've got some too. I know you do. That you've got some cardinal nerd sins that you
have not. I do have. I mean, you would have to go through the list. I feel like you told me to see a bunch of movies that I've seen that I was supposed to see. I have not seen the new Black Panther. I mean that's. I feel like everyone went and saw that movie, and then that guy gave that voicemail to you, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll wait.
I have thoughts.
Yeah,
Black Panther 2. It was good.
Good. It's supposed to be good. That's what they're trying to do. Oh boy.
It was very contrived. It was very much I do have issues with it. It was very well executed despite its flaws, but its flaws were very, very apparent.
That sucks. Okay.
So
well, I hope that you like Willow. I hope that it holds up in your mind.
I'm still watching the old Star Wars movies as like my bread and butter. So I'm okay with 80s movies, and I can suspend all disbelief with special effects. That's not an issue.
Okay.
As long as the story is good, you got me.
Okay.
So I'll watch the thing. I'm also a sucker for Val Kilmer. Like he's so good.
Okay, he's real good in that. It's one of the good ones.
Yeah. Okay. But man, Legendary moving to Sony. That's going to get some waves.
I think, okay, we have to wrap this up. But
we got to wrap this up.
Okay, but go back. No, go back for a second.
Okay.
The Sony movies are almost like they're just missing some things. Like the Spider-Man movies are built on so much better things, but like the newest Uncharted movie, there's things in the movie I liked. We talked about the adventure aspects. I like all that stuff, but like there's a ton of stuff in that movie. It's like, did no one play the video game? Did no one understand like the fun dialogue? Like, why does this not feel like that?
The ending scene for Uncharted, where he does the little sleight of hand, takes the necklace back, and he comes in with the gun and the mustache. That was what I wanted the whole movie to be.
Yeah, them jockeying for high status the whole time. How about you go punch you in the face? Like all of their fighting, I'm like, what? I didn't understand why they weren't on the same team, and that the movie is not fun because they're not friends to each other. And then by the time you get that, the movie's over.
Yeah.
It's wild. I couldn't believe how boring that movie is. The movie just feels boring.
It's a wild 7 out of 10 for me.
Okay,
like,
I give it maybe a 6, but like
6.5, 7 is kind of where I sat on it. Like depending on the mood I'm in. Like I'm a sucker for adventure movies, and I'm going to see the crap out of Indiana Jones when it comes out, and I'm gonna let it break my heart.
You would watch. I know we're gonna walk into that brick wall. You would watch National Treasure before turning on that movie again. For a fun adventure movie, like
no, I love National Treasure. You know I do.
You would watch Sahara before you go back and watch that.
That was actually a fun movie that should have had its sequel. So you need to stop. All right, stop talking shit about that. That was a great movie.
Rather go watch the Mummy trilogy. Even though you know it ends.
You mean Mummy 1 and 2. Number 3 doesn't exist.
Oh, okay, Taylor. All right, that's where we wrap it up. If you're gonna gaslight me, we can end the show now.
Okay, Mummy 3 was not the best.
Okay.
All right. Anyways, thank you all for joining us today on the Cultured Nerd podcast. If you want to support us and help us do what we do, you can find us on Patreon. For those of you who do support us, thank you so much for your constant support.
It means a lot. We appreciate all of you. It pays bills. We appreciate all of you.
And when we mean it pays bills, I'm going to drop the thing. Running a podcast is not cheap. The software that we use to even do this live with you all, it's not cheap.
God, listen, don't put that on them. They don't.
It took a while for it to like us break even. Like I feel like that's where we're at.
I hear you. I agree.
And it's going to start all over on the new year when everything starts up again. But thank you all for joining us. I've been your host, Taylor Murphy. My co-host, Michael Santel, always bringing extra life to the party.
Real excited for Willow. Everyone, get hyped for Willow. Let's get Willow. Okay. Let's support.
Okay, I will watch Willow tonight. I will somehow... My wife is scared of Warwick Davis.
She'll like Willow. He's good at it.
But she was traumatized by the Leprechaun as a kid. So every time she sees that actor, she's like, I can't watch it.
He was Wicket. She'll fall in love with him.
But when I told her that, and then she sees Wicket as the Leprechaun, it's a problem. It's a problem. But thank you all for joining us. We will see you all next week.
Okay, bye.